More than 99% of all the species that have ever existed on Earth are just, well, gone. They're completely extinct.
Yeah, it's a staggering number when you really stop and think about it.
Right. I mean, when you look at the incredible diversity of the living world today, the elephants, redwood trees, deep-sea corals, or even just you and me, we're looking at a tiny fractional remnant of a much grander, much more volatile story.
It really forces a complete perspective shift because we tend to think of the biosphere as this permanent fixture. But the fossil record tells us that life on Earth is essentially a series of these massive sweeping resets.
Which is exactly the core mission of our deep dive today. We're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources outlining the big 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history.
Right, the big ones.
Yeah, and we want to understand the mechanisms of how our planet wipes the slate clean, and what those ancient catastrophes can actually tell us about the environmental pressures we're facing right now.
The mechanics of those resets are crucial to understand because learning how a planet sheds its biosphere, it isn't just a history lesson. It's a lesson in the physical limits of biology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you don't need a science degree to follow this. We're going to break it all down together. I actually found an analogy really helpful while reading through the material.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
Okay, so imagine a massive global library containing every single book ever written in the history of the world. Just a true archive of everything.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now imagine that 99% of those books have been destroyed. The surviving 1% is what we see outside our windows today. But to understand how that library lost so many books, we have to distinguish between, a few books naturally wearing out over centuries versus the entire building catching fire.
That's a great way to look at it. The natural wearing out of the books, that's what biologists call the background rate of extinction.
Right, the background rate.
Yeah, because species are not permanent. Just as individual organisms are born and eventually die, a species as a whole emerges, adapts to its environment, persists for, perhaps a few million years, and eventually fades away.
Wait, so a species dying out is just a natural part of how life turns over? It's not always this huge disaster.
Exactly. It gets outcompeted or its specific niche changes. That slow, steady trickle of loss is just the baseline rhythm of evolution.
So it's sort of a zero-sum game in slow motion. As one species fades out, a new one is usually evolving to take its place.
Right. The shelves of your library are constantly being restocked as the old books crumble. And as long as the rate of speciation, new species emerging keeps pace with that background extinction rate, the biosphere remains totally robust.
Okay, but we're talking about the library catching fire today.
Yes. 5 times in the last 500 million years, that dynamic completely fractured. The rate of loss skyrocketed so fast that evolution just couldn't keep up. The library caught fire.
And that's the technical definition of a mass extinction, right? A sharp, worldwide spike where a massive share of all species across, oceans, land, plants, animals, they all just collapse together in a short span of geological time.
Yes, in a geological blink of an eye. Now, a blink of an eye in geology can still be thousands of years, but in the context of deep time, it's virtually instantaneous.
But how could we possibly know this if it happened hundreds of millions of years ago? Like, how do we read that history?
We read it in what we can call the stone diary, the sedimentary rock record.
Okay, the stone diary.
Right. Over millions of years, sand, mud, and minerals settle and compress into distinct rock layers, and the simple rule of superposition means that the deeper layers are older.
And those layers act as pages, I assume, trapping the fossils of whatever was living when that mud was laid down.
Precisely. If the background rate is normal, you just see a fluid, gradual transition in the types of fossils as you read the layers from bottom to top. But a mass extinction leaves a stark, sudden boundary.
Like a literal line in the rock.
Exactly. You'll have a layer of limestone teeming with a vast, vibrant array of marine fossils. Then, directly above it, a thin band of barren clay. And above that, a drastically impoverished layer where most of those previous life forms are simply gone.
Wow. Replaced by completely different organisms.
Yeah, exactly.
So that line in the rock is basically the fire alarm. Let's open up the earliest chapters, the Big Five. I want to walk through the mechanisms of each, because the sources show it's never as simple as just everybody died.
No, it's usually a very specific cascade of events.
Right. So the first one happens around 444 million years ago, at the end of the Ordovician period.
And keep in mind, this was a marine world. Almost all complex life was in the oceans back then. And this first great dying was driven by a dramatic climate swing. The supercontinent Gondwana drifted over the South Pole, and a massive ice age began.
But looking at the sources, the cold itself wasn't the only killer, was it? It was what the ice actually did to the water.
Yeah, the formation of massive continental ice sheets locked up huge amounts of the planet's water. And this caused global sea levels to just plummet drastically.
Which is bad news if you live in shallow water.
Exactly. Most life thrived in the shallow, warm, sunlit waters of the continental shelves. When the ocean retreated, those vital habitats were exposed to the air and destroyed.
So it was a massive loss of real estate. The shallow seas just drained away. And then, reading further, the climate kind of whiplashed back the other way.
It did. It's a brutal double punch. Volcanic activity was pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, but because the rocks were covered in ice, the normal weathering processes that pull CO2 out of the air, they slowed down.
So the greenhouse gas just builds up.
Right. The climate rapidly heated, the glaciers melted, and the oceans flooded back in. Freezing and draining, followed by rapid heating and flooding, it wiped out about 85% of marine species.
That's just wild. Which brings us to the second event, the late Devonian, about 372 million years ago. And what stood out to me here is that this wasn't one single bad day, but a series of drawn-out pulses.
Yes, very drawn out.
And the trigger seems incredibly ironic. It was actually the success of life on land that murdered life in the oceans.
It's a profound biological paradox, really. During the Devonian, plants on land began developing deep, complex root systems for the very first time. They started breaking up solid rock, actively creating deep soil.
Which, sounds great for the land.
It was revolutionary for the land. But all those loose nutrients and minerals from the new soil were eventually washed by rain into the rivers and flushed straight into the oceans.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, this massive influx of fertilizer caused unprecedented global algae blooms in the shallow seas.
Wait, that sounds exactly like the agricultural runoff dead zones we see today, like in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
Just on a planetary scale.
The mechanism is identical. The algae bloom wildly, and when they die and sink, bacteria consume them. And those bacteria multiply and consume almost all the dissolved oxygen in the water.
Wow. So the oceans just became totally oxygen-starved?
Yes, anoxic. The life that had survived the Ordovician essentially suffocated because the plants on land were doing too well.
It just shows how deeply interconnected the Earth's systems are. You change the dirt, you suffocate the sea. Let's fast forward a bit to the fourth extinction, around 201 million years ago, just to keep things chronological before we tackle the really bad one.
Ah, the end-Triassic.
Yeah.
The end-Triassic is a classic case of geological forces tearing the world apart. The supercontinent Pangaea began to rift, literally unzipping to form what would eventually become the Atlantic Ocean.
Which sounds incredibly violent.
It was. This unzipping created volcanic rifts that pumped colossal amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere.
Another massive climate shock. And this is the event that kind of cleared the ecological stage, right? Because the sources point out that by wiping out the dominant reptiles at the time, this extinction opened up the space that allowed the dinosaurs to rise to dominance.
Exactly. Dinosaurs were a relatively minor group before that volcanic rifting. The end-Triassic essentially handed them the keys to the biosphere.
Okay, so we covered the first, second, and fourth. We skipped the third because it really requires its own dedicated focus. About 252 million years ago, at the end of the Permian period, the Earth experienced what scientists grimly call the Great Dying.
The Great Dying. It is the closest complex life has ever come to total annihilation. Roughly 90% of all marine species and the majority of land species were completely wiped out.
9 in 10 species in the ocean. The library wasn't just burned, it was incinerated. What could possibly drive the numbers that high?
The root cause was an almost incomprehensible volcanic event in modern-day Siberia.
Okay, let me ask for some clarification here, because when people hear volcanism, or a volcanic event, they usually picture, one giant mountain blowing its top, like Mount St. Helens in a movie.
Right, a big explosion, ash, and then it's over. But flood basalt volcanism is entirely different. Imagine the Earth's crust splitting open in massive fissures and rivers of highly fluid magma just pouring out across the landscape.
And this wasn't a quick thing, right?
No, this didn't last for a few days. The eruptions pulsed on and off for hundreds of thousands of years, eventually covering an area the size of the continental United States in deep lava.
It's hard to even fathom that scale. It makes me think of an analogy. It wasn't an explosion that blew up the garage. It was more like someone parking a car in a closed garage, leaving the engine running, and letting the exhaust slowly fill the space.
The exhaust analogy is incredibly apt, actually, especially when you look at the specific geology of Siberia at that time.
Why, what was in Siberia?
Well, the magma wasn't just erupting onto the surface. It was intruding into massive underground basins of coal and carbonate rocks. The heat literally baked these ancient fossil fuel deposits, releasing staggering volumes of carbon dioxide and methane into the air.
Oh, wow. So it was essentially the ultimate natural burning of fossil fuels.
Exactly, and the cascade of horrors that followed is what did the killing. The atmosphere superheated, the carbon dioxide mixed with water vapor to form acid rain, which stripped the land of vegetation.
And without plant roots, the soil washes away again.
Right, into the oceans. The oceans absorbed the excess CO2 and became violently acidic, which dissolves the shells of marine life. And as the oceans heated up, they lost their oxygen.
The closed garage.
Yeah.
Acidic, suffocating, and boiling. It's terrifying. It took millions of years for the world to recover from that. But while the Great Dying was the absolute worst in terms of numbers, the fifth extinction is definitely the most famous.
The end Cretaceous, 66 million years ago.
The dinosaur killer.
Yes, the end of the non-avian dinosaurs. And unlike the drawn-out poisoning of the Permian, this was a sudden, violent external shock. A city-sized asteroid slammed into modern-day Mexico.
The kinetic energy of that is just mind-blowing. But reading the sources, it wasn't just the explosion or the tsunamis that killed the dinosaurs worldwide. It was exactly where the asteroid hit.
The location was uniquely catastrophic. The bedrock there was rich in gypsum, which contains high amounts of sulfur. The immense heat of the impact vaporized that rock, injecting billions of tons of sulfur aerosols high into the stratosphere.
And sulfur aerosols are highly reflective, right?
Well,
So they essentially formed a global mirror in the sky.
they blocked out the sun. The Earth plunged into a deep, freezing impact winter. Without sunlight, the food chain collapsed from the bottom up.
Now, I do want to note a detail from the sources. The biosphere wasn't exactly in perfect health when that rock arrived, right?
True. There's evidence that massive volcanic eruptions in what is now India were already stressing global ecosystems. The asteroid was the final knockout punch.
But not everything died. And this is where the story gets really fascinating to me. The giant reptiles vanished. But a small branch of avian dinosaurs survived.
The ancestors of modern birds.
Right, which is amazing. And alongside them, another group survived. Small, furry mammals that had spent the last 100 million years hiding in burrows.
Their small size and ability to burrow protected them from the worst of it. They needed very little food. So when the dust settled, those surviving mammals inherited a newly empty world.
Which leads to this massive aha moment. Because those small, furry mammals survived, we are literally here today because of that specific asteroid hitting Mexico 66 million years ago.
It is a humbling thought. We are the beneficiaries of that specific apocalypse.
But how did we actually prove it? You mentioned the stone diary earlier. What is the literal text in the rock that proves a space rock killed the dinosaurs?
It's a beautiful piece of geology. In rock layers all over the globe, right at the exact geological moment the dinosaurs vanished, scientists found a thin layer of clay. And this clay contains unusually high concentrations of a metal called iridium.
And iridium is not something you typically find in the Earth's crust.
Right, it's extremely rare on the surface, but highly abundant in asteroids. Finding a worldwide dusting of this cosmic metal right on top of the last dinosaur fossils was the chemical smoking gun.
Okay, so we've looked at the big five. Ice ages, ocean dead zones, continents unzipping, volcanic coal fires, and an asteroid. Seems like a random assortment of disasters. But the sources point out a clear, common thread.
The mechanism varies, but the underlying killer is always the same: the speed of the change.
The speed. Let me try an everyday analogy here. Think of an ecosystem like a car's shock absorbers. They can handle a bumpy, changing road if you drive slowly, right? The background rate of evolution relies on that slow change.
That's a good way to picture it.
But if you're flying down the road and you hit a massive speed bump at 100 miles an hour, the suspension doesn't have time to compress. It just snaps.
Exactly. Earth's climate has always fluctuated. But when those fluctuations happen over tens of millions of years, life adapts. When they're compressed into a few thousand years or a few months, with the asteroid biology cannot mutate fast enough to survive. The speed breaks the system.
Which brings us to a very serious question about the world we're driving in right now. Because many scientists argue we're in the early stages of a sixth mass extinction. And this time, the driver is human activity.
Yes. Habitat destruction, climate change, pollution, overhunting, invasive species. We're applying the pressures of multiple ancient mass extinctions all at once.
Now, to be fair to the scientific debate, and we want to ensure we're looking at the sources impartially here, the sources do emphasize that we haven't lost anything close to the 90% seen in the ancient events, right? And exact rates are genuinely difficult to measure.
That is a crucial distinction. The total percentage of extinct species right now is relatively small compared to the big five. But the alarm is not based on the magnitude of what is already dead. It's based on the rate of what is dying.
The speed bump.
Exactly. While the exact rate is debated, the direction and cause are undisputed. Species are being lost significantly faster than normal because of us.
So we haven't hit the bottom of the cliff yet, but we are changing the world faster than life can keep up.
That is the sober lesson from the deep past, yes.
It's a grim reality to process. Looking at the stone diary, is there any comfort to be found in there?
Well, there is the strange comfort of resilience. Life has been struck down to a whisker of oblivion 5 times, and every single time it recovered, reassembling into new, wonderful forms. Life at the biosphere level is astonishingly resilient.
But there's a huge catch to that resilience, isn't there?
Yes. The long run for recovery means millions of years. Recovery offers absolutely no rescue to the specific species caught in the fall, which, right now, includes us.
Yeah. Think about that stone diary we talked about today. If life recovers and a new intelligent species digs through the rock layers 100 million years from now, what exactly will our layer look like?
It's a profound question.
Will they find a thin, strange band of pollution, microplastics, and habitat loss marking our time, just like we found the iridium from the asteroid? And what wonderful, unimaginable new forms of life will have taken our place? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking closely at the world around you and keep asking questions.